Second session is really looking to get into the nitty-gritty of how do you get started with Regen Ag. What are the correct opportunities for you and your farm? What are the easy wins and where are the trade-offs? And ultimately, what we're hoping to do is learn from others' mistakes as well. So we've got 3 fantastic farmers to hear from who will explain the tools and techniques that they've been using and working on in their journey with regenerative agriculture, and perhaps some of the information they wish they'd known before they started. So we're going to hear from each farmer in turn, and then bring them all up here on these lovely chairs for some questions at the end. So if you've got questions as we go through, just hold them in your mind, and then we'll get a bit of chat and discussion going on after that. So first up, we've got Phil White from Doyley's Farm in Stadhampton. The White family have been farming there for the past 3 generations and looking to embrace regenerative farming practices, improving soil health, biodiversity and reducing carbon footprint. Approach to go beyond sustainable and looking to make a positive impact and hand over the farm in a better way for future generations. Looking at things like no-till, rotational grazing, cover crops and encouraging biodiversity through their farming system, which has native shorthorn and Aberdeen Angus beef, chickens, sheep, turkeys and egg-laying hens. But I'm sure Phil will tell us more about that, so I'll hand over to you, Phil. Thank you.
Well, apparently we're the boy band, but I don't know. We haven't really worked out which one of us is going to be Robbie. I think, yeah. Nick, was it you were going to take off your shirt later? Maybe. Hi, everyone. I'm really delighted and very honoured, actually, to be asked to talk about my regenerative experience so far. And Alice, I promise you there'll be plenty of mistakes. Talk about imposter syndrome. I'm sure most of the lessons I've learned will be pretty obvious, but here goes. A little bit of context. I think you've had the background on what we do, but I was born and raised on our little farm in South Oxfordshire. Look, there's another one. Is that right? And up until the age of about 21, that was all I was ever going to do, was to be a farmer. I had no intention of doing anything else. And my dad, like a lot of dads, I suppose, was quite stubborn. But he stuck to his rotation, 3 years arable, 3 years grass, clover, refused to use insecticides, only sprayed anything as a last resort. And we used to graze our cattle and sheep on our cover crops over winter, and a lot of low-yielding spring crops with minimal inputs. Wouldn't make silage in case we disturbed any nesting birds, and he liked nothing more than stopping to watch the lapwings or, he would be mucking about planting trees and hedges when we should have been out there spreading fertiliser and spraying stuff. Infuriating bloke. To paraphrase Mark Twain, when I was 21, my father was a complete fool, but it's amazing how much he'd learned by the time I reached the age of 40. So as a headstrong Reading University graduate, I'd been brainwashed a bit with the doctrine that to be a good farmer, we needed to throw the kitchen sink at it, and Dad wasn't having any of it. So we parted ways. I went off to work outside farming for a bit, and then when I came back, I proceeded to throw the kitchen sink at it. And it sort of worked for a bit, because I'd obviously inherited some quite nice soil, and all my mates are still convinced that it was just the soil and, I was lucky. But, of course, it wasn't an accident that we were able to get on with a bit of tractoring when everybody else couldn't. And we seemed to hang on to the moisture a bit better than everybody else did. And we grow some good crops. But anyway, inevitably, the honeymoon period came to an end and got me thinking, really. We had done one thing, which I sort of, I'm glad we did, and that was Dad had started an application for a high-level stewardship scheme just before he died, so we stuck with that. And I also, I can't remember how, but got into herbal lays a long time ago, and that was working. But pretty soon it became clear to me that the conventional system wasn't working as the soil organic matter started to collapse, and I started struggling with more weeds, more disease, yields were dropping off, and input costs just kept going up. And it became clear that the soil was suffering, and I'm sure many of you have read this book, and it was one of the first ones I picked up, and probably was the one that changed my mind the most about my approach. So, it all starts with the soil, obviously. I suppose this is the sort of soil I inherited, but I could show you some pretty horrible, blocky pictures of some arable land that had gone the wrong way. I was at a retirement party for our HLS advisor, actually, and I got chatting to a neighbour, and he started going on about this direct drilling thing, and I just thought, oh, there's something in this. I mean, he was about the most conventional farmer I could imagine, other than the fact that the penny had dropped with him about direct drilling. And so we sort of teamed up and started to think how we could work together on a relatively modest area, sharing some machinery. And about the same time, I listened to a podcast by Liz Geneva, who many of you will have heard of, I'm sure. She used to be AHDB, now she's independent. And she had a epiphany, I think she described it on this podcast, which I'll probably screw up. But it was something about, what are we doing here? You know, because I kind of overcomplicate everything I do, as anyone who knows me will tell you. And, you know, farming systems are very complicated, as we've just heard described by Fabio. But she said, basically, it's just taking the sun, using these solar panels, and turning it into meat. And when you boil it right back down to that, you suddenly sort of think, oh, actually, yeah. You know, and if it's not just ryegrass or ryegrass and clover with a ton of fertiliser, but it's something that looks a bit like that, suddenly I think it starts to get quite exciting. So that took me on to getting in touch with precision grazing. James Daniel, again, many of you will have heard of him, now Farmers Weekly Livestock Advisor of the Year, I think. So I was one of the early members of that group. So James took me under his wing, got me onto the sort of basics of rotational grazing, as it was then, and obviously I was quite seduced by the idea that without doing anything much, other than spending a bit of time moving some electric fences, I could increase the amount of pasture I was growing by 40-50%. That sounded pretty good to me. I was hooked, got the old wrapper wheelbarrow out, and started shifting my lambs around. And what a difference. And I think, you know, we're all looking for that affirmation, aren't we? And I remember a contract shepherd saying to me, bloody hell, Phil, your lamb's looking well. The herbal lays were working. And then when it came up an opportunity to have it in a stewardship scheme, we did that on a rented farm, and it's a complete no-brainer, really. And I wish I could show you the mini field lab I did, which is this field on one side with wonderful salad bar, and then on the other side I thought, well, I need some high-quality silage, so I'll do a Westerwald Italian ryegrass mix. And, yeah, we had some decent silage with a ton of fertiliser on it. But look at those fields now. The herbal lay still looks like that, and I've done nothing to it, really. And the ryegrass has had to be overseeded with vetch and then overseeded with some clover, and it's all gappy and full of thistles and docks and needs reseed. So that's where we're going. This is my latest favourite book. I sort of should have put Rooted in there somewhere, but it's not. But that's one of my favourite books. And quite interesting, I think, when you think about context, because there's a lot of ideas in this book that can't be applied in our context because we're constrained by the amount of land we've got access to and rents and all that. But there's a lot of principles in there that can be applied, I think. And I only show you the picture of my favourite cow. Because I suppose I'm starting to get it. Arrogantly, you think you know a lot, and then every day you realise how much you don't know. But that's the right sort of cow, I think. small frame who produces every year a wonderful heifer calf who almost outgrows her. And you offer her the wonderful pasture, and all she wants to do is go and browse a load of conker trees, leaves all hawthorn in the hedge. They know, don't they? They've got one job, produce a calf, and then do it again. And the ones that I've been keeping, because we know them, and they're all, oh, cow, and they're always a pain in the neck, because you have to get them in for crush to milk them out or whatever. They're going, sadly. I'm going to press this button. I don't know if it'll work, but this is just a little sort of salad bar story going with the kicking the hay habit of trying to reduce the amount of hay we're making or silage and getting stuff to grow out of the ground. You know, the living root in the soil thing. We've outwintered for the first couple of months of the winter 3 years ago, and then we've outwintered for the whole winter for the last 2 years on arable cover crops like that, and I still haven't quite nailed it. That, you know, you can find the best one, don't you? And last summer was pretty dire for trying to establish cover crops, so there's still too many bales and not enough stuff coming out of the ground. But I'm talking to inspirational people like George Hosier down in Wiltshire, who's growing these massive cover crops, putting tons of carbon underground. You know, he might have a couple of bales on the side of the field and a bale unroller that he gets out occasionally, but mostly they're eating that, feeding themselves, spreading their own muck, and what a lovely system. I'm not following my script, so somebody keep an eye on time. Don't know about anybody else, but my favourite day of the year is turnout day. Isn't it just fantastic? You've had the cows in all winter, been driving that bloody tractor up and down, stinking of diesel, bedding up, mucking out, feeding out of a feeder wagon, and in the spring, out they go, kicking their heels and running around like they're all young calves again. For me now, every day of the year is turnout day, because every day I go out there on the quad bike and I go, come on cows, and they all come running and they cross over the fence. And yeah, this was a slightly less spectacular cover crop, but it was an attempt at a diverse winter cover mix. We'd seen these amazing pictures from New Zealand of where they were growing mega cover crops. These are May planted, so you're missing out on an arable crop in this thing in order to build the soil for the next 10 years. And it was 20 different varieties. Didn't exactly work, but that was it. We held the 50 cows on 5 hectares for 2 months over the Christmas period when we were busy with turkey, so it worked pretty well, and just rolling out bale of hay to supplement it. So yeah, that's what I do. I mean, people say, doesn't it take you a lot of time? Well, no, it doesn't take any more time, really, than looking after cows in the shed. Would it work if you were John Lloyd down at Cheersley and you've got 5,000? No, possibly not. Does it work on every soil type? I'd love to know. I properly fouled up when I grew some fodder beet. Again, it's the idea, I can go 20 tonnes of dry matter a hectare. And then I forgot to put a back fence on. And the cattle were just tracking backwards and forwards to the water trough, and they trashed a field. Learning from my mistakes. I've learned from that not to let them do that. They get moved every day in the winter, and sometimes it looks like absolute carnage out there. But it's amazing. You know, in a week or two's time, the regrowth comes and the soil's repaired itself. And if you do need to move them twice a day, well, move them twice a day. It only takes 10 minutes to roll out a reel. That's what I do. Right, this is a kicking the hay, 2 minutes, hay habit idea. Very quickly, grass growth curve, obviously everyone knows, grows a lot in May, June, drops off a bit in July, and then sometimes you get a bit more grass in the autumn. When does everyone spread fertiliser? Well, you see your neighbours out there in March, don't you? And you think, shit, I better go and spread fertiliser. What happens? Loads more grass just at the time you don't need it. Best bang for your buck, if you're going to spend money on fertiliser, put it on then and grow some stuff to get you through the winter. So you don't have to spend so much money on net wrap and moving bales. I reckon that's a good idea. Riding the grass wave. I love the idea of control. You can't control stuff, can you? You sort of think you can, you can't. So rather than getting het up about it, James Daniel's idea is riding the grass wave. which is what we're doing at the moment. And what a wave, wow, the 2023 grass wave. But measuring it every 2 weeks, putting it on AgriNet, working out what you've got, it allows you to, I find it allows me to plan ahead, and I'm a lot more comfortable with making early decisions. That boy's just come back from New Zealand, so he's getting the hang of it. Just get it bought. Best words of advice I had last year from Colin Bateman in Cumbria. I had been pushing that bloody, wrapper wheelbarrow around, wasting time, and that thing on the back has saved me hours putting up fences, taking it down. And this thing on the front took me about 20 minutes to make. I can just drive over a fence without getting off. It's amazing how little things that make a big difference. Ben Taylor Davis is another person who may be known to you, Regen Ben. He talks about earning the right to use a direct drill. You obviously can't just go straight in with a direct drill. The soil has to be in the right place for it. So don't be afraid to not deviate from that occasionally. That lad, Nick, our son, is at the Wild Farmed Day today, representing Doyley's Farm. We've got 40 hectares of wild farm wheat this year, so we'll be one of the smallest growers, I expect, in that amazing group. No pesticides, 4-way mix of 4 different varieties, including some heritage wheat and a clover understory. And I just wanted to show this picture because this is where the bales were 2 years ago, and there's more organic matter there, and the crop's that much higher. So that's quite interesting, bringing organic matter onto the farm. Mark, project for this year on my sticky label is going to be learning how to do compost better, 3D farming. I love the idea of hedges. We do chickens. I haven't got time to talk about them. We've got a little meat box delivery thing going. The slogan is, I'd be really interested to know what you think, you are what your meat eats. Or you are what your meat eats. Something like that. But we haven't got the van done yet, so I don't know whether to or not. It's quite a lot of work. I haven't found the silver bullet, but someone said it's between your ears. I think you need to be... I found I get a bit carried away and probably need to calm down. As somebody once said to me, calm down to a panic, Phil. There's a really good podcast, if you haven't listened to it, by a guy called Michael Blanche. And he's done a series of podcasts about time, because time is short. And as I've just proved. And he said in that podcast, it's not how hard you row, it's what boat you're in. So we're in the right boat. I know that because I can see you all out there. And I said back to him, right, it's not just what boat you're in, it's who's in your crew, getting the right vet, agronomist, team, Harper Adams student, mates who you can talk to about it. And that's my summary. So I'm really sorry I've overrun. I knew I would.
Absolutely brilliant, Phil. Thank you so much. Yeah, never enough time, but we'll have some time for questions afterwards. Really fascinating insight. I love the calm down to a panic. I'm going to use that. So brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Phil.